Moses brought 10 plagues upon Egypt. Then the first act is called miracle. It wasn't called a plague because it didn't harm Egypt. It only demonstrated that Moses had God's miraculous power. Then, what was the first miracle performed by Moses? It was turning his staff into a snake. Let's look at this. At this time, God said he would punish Egypt. Moreover, he appointed Moses as God's representative. Before whom would Moses act as God? Before Pharaoh. In other words, Pharaoh, are you a god? Or am I Moses the God? Pharaoh was very proud. At this moment, someone named Moses claimed, I am God. But who really was the true God, Pharaoh or Moses? Of course, we know Moses wasn't actually God. The true God was the one behind Moses. Thus, Moses acted as if he were God himself. Pharaoh wanted to confront. God intended to strike Pharaoh and Egypt, so they would see that this man called Moses was indeed divine. From then on, whenever Moses was mentioned, their name, and they became very frightened. Then what is the first miracle next? God instructed Moses and Aaron, saying, if Pharaoh says to you, perform a miracle for us, then tell Aaron, throw your staff down before Pharaoh, and it will become a snake. Moses and Aaron did exactly as they were told. They went to see Pharaoh and carried out everything the Lord had commanded. Aaron threw his staff down before Pharaoh and his officials. The staff turned into a snake. So Pharaoh summoned the learned men and sorcerers, the magicians of Egypt, who practiced dark arts. Each of them cast down. They individually abandoned their staffs, and their staffs also turned into snakes. But Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. Yet Pharaoh hardened his heart, did not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had foretold. Then was the first miracle, the miracle of Aaron's staff, greater? Aaron's staff or the magician's staffs? The staff in Aaron's hand was the one God gave him to perform miracles. It turned into a snake, and moreover, swallowed the staffs of Pharaoh's priests. But Pharaoh didn't understand that his own sorcerers were merely performing tricks and various evil enchantments. These are not true miracles at all. A genuine miracle cannot be overcome by any kind of sorcery. That is called a miracle. At this point, Moses and Aaron began to gain confidence. They started feeling empowered and no longer feared. It's as if Satan's world is attacking us. On the day the Father began to give to Heber, what authority does it begin with? Shebo is no longer afraid. Who dares attack? Destroy him with miracles. At this moment, the people of God began to grow greatly in faith. This was the first miracle. Yet this miracle is not called a calamity, because it didn't harm Egypt at all. The first act was a miracle, not a plague. Then, the first actual plague was turning water into blood. When Moses turned his staff into a snake, Pharaoh ignored it. So when Egypt was struck next, would Pharaoh care? Would he finally understand that Yahweh is God? Would he now recognize Yahweh? We'll see in what follows. The next plague, water turning into blood. The miracle of water turned into blood. Amen.